Professor of psychology and psychiatry at Emory University, author of The Political Brain, The Role of Emotion in Deciding the Fate of the Nation, which comes out tomorrow, Dr. Drew Weston. He's got a piece in the American Prospect earlier this month and a blog on the Huffington Post, which reinforce his thesis from his book, which, Dr. Weston, if I can be so bold, according to your book, is that successful campaigns compete in the marketplace of emotions and not primarily in the marketplace of ideas. Tell us about that.
Well, the basic idea is that the basic idea of the book is that you can campaign the way the Democrats typically have, which is with a laundry list of positions and issues and policy statements, or you can do what Republicans have, which is to tell people what your principles are, and to give them personal stories, to give them examples that make their heart flutter, and that's actually what gets people elected.
Now, I think there's some validity to what you're talking about, but give me, an example of, and you go through this obviously about guns, and you talk about this with Kerry, but what do you perceive would be the famous elevator pitch that people are looking for the Democratic Party?
Famous elevator pitch meaning?
Meaning, you're in an elevator ride, you got to quickly tell them what the Democratic Party stands for.
How much profanity can I use on radio?
Well, it depends on how much cash you have to spend on it.
Well, there's really two pitches. One is that you do the best by speaking genuinely with people, and your job as a candidate is not to look for look for your values in the polls. It's to start with your values, start with your principles. Vote with your principles, and don't listen to someone when they tell you better not vote for that or you better not say that because that's not going to play well in Oshkosh. What you really need to do is to start with what you really believe, and then use your pollsters to help you refine your message so that you can actually talk to the American people about it.
Well, why do you think Democrats have this problem as opposed to Republicans?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One of them is that we're a very cerebral party. We'd like to think of ourselves as rational. And the irony in all this is that when my colleagues and I at Emory did a brain scanning study in the 2004 election and looked at the brains of Republicans and Democrats as they were facing threatening information about Kerry and Bush, as a scientist, I wanted to know the results, and as a partisan, I was hoping I'd find the Fox News centers of the brain that are responsible for distortion. And the sad thing was that there were no such centers. It turned out the Democrats and Republicans had exactly the same circuitry firing, and it was everything but rational circuitry.
So the idea is that people don't vote based on a rational level; they vote based on a more emotional level.
Well, yeah, and just to give an example, when Republicans talk about, we could make it guns, we could make it abortion, we could make it gays, we could make it welfare, we could make it poverty, we could make it any issue that we want to talk about. We'll use words like let's take the environment. We'll say global warming is a terrible problem. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if you felt anything when I said that, but I didn't. But and part of the reason why I didn't is that the word itself is fraught with associations that actually lead you in the opposite direction of what you want people to feel. That is, if you imagine George Carlin doing a riff on global warming, what comes to your mind when you think of warming? I think of Mom on apple pie and sitting by the fire, and when I first heard the term global warming, I thought, I was living in Boston, I thought, oh great, the Cape will be warmer on Memorial Day, maybe we can get in the water. But instead of using words like that, when you talk about a climate crisis, when you show people images of what this country will look like, what parts will be submerged in 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, when you did what Al Gore did in An Inconvenient Truth, where you could actually watch the polar ice caps melting, you could see the sort of those majestic glaciers falling, and when Al Gore used language like he never used in the 2000 election, like, this is our only home, with that kind of inflection, that's when you get people to feel something. And it's not that you want people to be irrational. It's that you have to recognize that, we don't pick our spouses based on a rational cost-benefit analysis, and we don't pick our presidents that way either.
Well, I mean, you don't. I went through. Well, I don't need to go into that.
I have to say, I did calculate the earning potential of my wife, and I did rationally survey her mom's appearance before I married her.
Yeah, I didn't actually go into the earning potential. My wife's a documentary filmmaker, but we don't need to talk about that. But let me ask you this: let's get to why do you think this happens? I mean,
Okay.
because I agree with you to a certain extent on your general thesis here. Why do you think this happens?
Well, there are two or three reasons. One of them is, again, that we're cerebral. We like to see ourselves as rational beings. I think a second piece of it is that for whatever reasons, the kind of people who go into particularly consulting on the Democratic side who have really misled our party for over a decade now, and for much of the last 30 years. They tend to be a risk-averse bunch. They're afraid of telling people to say what they believe for fear that if they tell them to say that and they lose, it'll be clear that they'll be out on a limb. And so they're much likely instead to say things like, "Well, don't vote against the president on this Iraq war bill because they'll say that you don't support our troops." And to me, that's playing checkers, and when the other side's playing chess, that's thinking one move ahead. They'll say this, as opposed to thinking, well, I'm going to think 6 moves ahead. And how would you respond? How do you stop them from saying support our troops? And it isn't difficult to figure out how to do that if you just think like a chess player.
So, I mean, one of the things you're suggesting is that the Democratic Party has a consultant class that is basically about covering their own arses, as opposed to actually allowing the full potential of the candidates to take hold.
It's a huge piece, and I guess the other two pieces, or two other pieces of it. One is that if you think about what are the Achilles heels on the right and the left, I think the Achilles heels of conservatives tends to be their lack of compassion. Bush preached compassionate conservatism, and we've seen what that looked like in New Orleans in Katrina. I think the Achilles heel for the left is our similar inability to do aggression. We have a hell of a time standing up for ourselves and saying when something's wrong, that's wrong, and I'm going to oppose it, and I'll tell you why. And we end up sending these very powerful messages. They're sort of meta messages to the American people, where they're watching our lips move, listening to our words. They don't hear the words because what they hear is cowardice. And when you do things like you vote for wars that you don't agree with, you vote to support a surge that you don't agree with, and you remove the timelines because a president who's at 28% in the polls has stared you down, you can say whatever you want, but the average American comes away saying, these people, I wouldn't believe them on national security because if they can't stand up to the president, what would ever make me think they'd stand up to terrorists?
Well, it's a very interesting theory, and I appreciate your coming on. This is a book I think that a lot of people should read, particularly in D.C. Dr. Drew Weston, thank you very much for joining us. The book comes out tomorrow, folks. We'll be right back. We'll talk a